Janelle Rice, and this is a meeting of the Joint Review Board, effective start time 3:45 on June 21st. First would be a call to order. If we could start out with a roll call. Janelle Rice, citizen, present, and chair.
So Janelle Rice here.
Yes.
Okay. Adam Gallagher from Dane County.
Present.
Lori Grigg from Madison College.
Present.
Andy Whalen, Oregon School District. And then Michael Zimmerman, City of Fitchburg here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business would be to a motion to approve the last minutes from the last meeting approximately a year ago. Do I have a motion to approve as stands?
I'll move to, I'll support.
So moved?
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Lori Grigg.
I appreciate that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our third order of business is a consideration and appointment for the Joint Review Board, the public member, which is currently held by me. Do we have any motions for another person to accept that position?
I would make a motion to reaffirm appointing Janelle Rice as the public member.
I'll second that.
I appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So I think the next piece of business that we've got, we are in point number 5 for those that are following the meeting, is a discussion of the responsibility of the Joint Review Board. I'm going to get this kicked off, and then I'm going to turn it over to Greg for a little bit of color. So effectively what the purpose of this committee is we take a look at the opportunities that we have as a city, where we can expand and where we can provide some specific growth in specific segments to the city. We are part of a process, and so our particular piece will traditionally oversee the tax increment districts within the city. And we also then work along with Plan Commission, Common Council, and a number of other entities, including county entities, to make certain that as we are adding that land for purpose, that we've really done a couple of things. We've made sure that it fits in with some strategic plans that we've got around the city. We take a look at the investments that we need to make as a city to prepare that land for use. And then finally, we go ahead and work with Mike and his team to potentially bring in new organizations to the city. Greg, can I turn this over to you for a little bit more color?
I think that's an excellent summary. So we'll be talking through the required findings for the creation of a TIF district, which is what we're here to discuss this afternoon, and we'll summarize the statutory findings that are included in the project plan. So that was a great overview. I don't have anything further to add.
I appreciate that. So Greg is with a group that's called Ehlers and Associates. They've been exceptional in helping our city do the diligence that's required, making sure that as we look at those expansions and those investments, that we are not only doing the right thing for the city, but that we are consistently not only right side up from a math, but many, many times way ahead of that. So we appreciate their efforts in making sure that not only are we expanding, we're doing that in a healthy way, not only to our citizens, but economically. So what we really have before us today is quite specifically a new tax increment district, number 14. Greg, can I ask you to walk us through that?
Yes, thank you.
I just have one question here. Did we do the chairperson, the reaffirmation of the chairperson yet?
I think we did.
We did the
both
citizen member.
Why don't we just, I think we did,
Just
but
we
I'd
need-
rather do it.
For a formal motion, because
Yeah.
they're each listed separately there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can I ask for a motion to approve the citizen member as the chairperson, which would be me, and therefore I cannot move on that?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Lori.
I appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg, I think the mic is back to you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go through a presentation that kind of summarizes the project plan and the creation of TIF District number 14. There's no new information in this presentation. This is just a summary of what was already included in the project plan and distributed to you, but just as to kind of stay on point in terms of the key findings that are related to this new TIF district. So first, I'll just speak to the timeline in terms of the TID creation process. There's been a few updates, so I just wanted to share some of the key dates. So we're at the first milestone for the TID creation process here this afternoon, which is the convening of the initial meeting of the Joint Review Board. You've already taken care of the official actions required at this meeting. We'll give you the overview of TID District number 14, but no action will be required on that at this meeting. Later on this evening, there is a public hearing that is scheduled to be held before the Plan Commission as required by statute. If the project plan and the creation of the district is approved by the Plan Commission, this will be forwarded to the Common Council for their consideration. That's going to occur on July 26th. And then the final Joint Review Board meeting, if it receives Common Council approval for this TIF district, will be on August 10th. We are also going to be satisfying the annual meeting requirement for the Joint Review Board at that August 10th meeting as well, where we will not only take up the creation of this district if it receives the other approvals, but we will also be presenting updates on all of the other cities' active tax incremental finance districts. Most of you are very familiar with how a TIF district works fundamentally, but I'll just give a quick recap in terms of how a TIF district works. So at the time a TIF district is created, it's a geographic area that is identified by a particular boundary. All of the properties within that district presently have a taxable value that is called the base value. All of the taxing jurisdictions will continue to collect their share of taxes on that base value, just like they do presently. The financial benefit of a TIF district is when that new value is created within the district, either due to appreciation or more likely due to construction of new development. That increase in value above the base is called the incremental value, and the city will retain all of the taxes generated on that new incremental value, the city, county, school district, and technical college's share, and use that revenue to pay for eligible expenses that are identified in the project plan. And when the TIF district has either reached the end of its maximum life or has generated sufficient revenue to pay off all of its expenses, the TIF district closes and all that incremental value returns to the tax rolls, and all the taxing jurisdictions benefit from that increased value. So that's just fundamentally how the TIF district works. In terms of some of the statutory findings that are required to create a new TIF district, we're going to start with what's called the 12% equalized value test. So under state law, a community cannot create a new TIF district unless the base value of the proposed district plus the incremental value of all existing districts does not exceed 12% of the city's total equalized value. So in this chart, we show compliance with the 12% test. It's worth noting that the city recently terminated and closed tax incremental district number 6, which was a larger district, which got the city back under the 12% limit. So even with the estimated base value of this district, which is estimated at about $4 million, the city is still under the 12% test based on the equalized values as of January 1st of 2021. Since this district is scheduled to be considered by the Common Council on July 26th, that would be the official creation date of the district if the district is formally created once the process is completed. So the 12% test is based on the equalized values that are available on that date, which is still going to be the 1/1/2021 values. So the city can proceed with creation of a new district, at least in terms of the 12% valuation test. Now let's speak to some of the objectives and goals of tax incremental district number 14. We've included a map here on the screen that's also in the project plan that kind of shows where the district is located, kind of south of Haight Farm Road, areas kind of along the Highway 14 corridor. So several large parcels are identified to be included within this proposed district. The main purpose of the district in terms of the project costs is to help pay for the public infrastructure and improvements and provide development incentives as determined by the city needed to help facilitate the anticipated commercial and residential development within the boundaries of this district. The general goal of the district is to really help continue to expand housing and commercial development opportunities within the city. In terms of the other statutory findings that are required, this is a mixed-use district, which means that not less than 50% of the area can be suitable for some combination of residential, commercial, and industrial development. You need at least two out of those three land uses, and the newly platted residential cannot exceed 35% of the total area of the district. So this proposed district is in compliance with all of those land use findings. In terms of the primary costs, we'll look at the detailed list in a moment, but as described in the project plan, the city could finance public infrastructure improvements either directly through city financing or could require a developer to construct those public improvements and reimburse those costs through the TIF district, or could require some of the public improvements to be paid entirely by a developer. So the city retains all of that flexibility to approach the project costs based on the particular development proposed and the overall financial objectives of the city. Any development incentive that would be required is required to have a development agreement between the developer and the city that needs to be approved by the Common Council. The city also, as part of its TIF best practices, typically requires all developers to go through what's called a pro forma review to kind of demonstrate the financial gap on the project, how TIF assistance is addressing that gap, and that the project meets the but-for test. Generally speaking, for the but-for finding for this particular district, the area likely would not develop absent the use of TIF district and having some of that funding available due to the extensive public infrastructure costs that are necessary to bring that area to fruition for development. Those costs typically aren't included presently in the city's capital improvement plan, but the TIF district could help accelerate those projects to help facilitate development within the area. The project plan also identifies just some annual costs for the city's planning, legal review, and other costs associated with administering the TIF district on an annual basis. So we've included here up on the screen, and what's also identified in the project plan is this specific list of infrastructure improvements and the other costs that I summarized. We show that these will likely be constructed in phases. Some of them, the initial projects, phase one's anticipated to be completed between 2023 and 2024. Future phases and infrastructure projects will be constructed to match the pace of development. There are a few projects that are, partially within the half-mile radius boundary of the district, which, fully benefit the district. It's really projects that are just adjacent to the boundary of the district. But so the city is completing certain project costs, within the TID boundary and then extending them to the nearest intersection. So just to kind of follow that typical practice of completing a public improvement, some of those fall just outside the boundary but are within that half mile, but are really benefiting the district at large. And then, as I said, some of the other costs are for just ongoing administrative, legal, and planning costs. And then we've also identified an allowance for development incentives to be determined based on development need and subject to approval by the Common Council of a development agreement. So as I mentioned, how the city ultimately finances these projects will largely depend on kind of the pace of the development and the nature of the investment, whether or not that's reimbursed through a development incentive or there's some combination of city financing. The plan kind of outlines all of those as potential options, so the city will kind of make those determinations as development proposals are brought forth. We've included a map that just ties out to that project list. Each project had a letter identifying, that ties out to this map that just kind of shows physically where some of the proposed infrastructure, utilities, and road work are proposed to be constructed. So the project plan is required to have a map that also shows where the projects are located. So we included that for reference as well. We've also kind of included some of the initial site layout and concepts that have been preliminarily proposed within this area. As you can see, it's kind of a combination of some residential development along with some commercial development within the site. So this was the basis for which we made our findings to make sure that the district was in compliance with those mixed-use tests in terms of at least 50% of the area is suitable for a combination of commercial, residential, and then there's the existing industrial development. But that residential area is less than 35% of the total area of the district, so we are in compliance with the mixed-use requirements under the TIF statutes. So this is kind of the preliminary site layout that kind of drives some of the development assumptions that I'll speak to next. So we've included kind of the estimated new incremental value. This is really an illustration of the potential full build-out of the site. So certainly, how this ultimately unfolds will largely depend on just kind of economic conditions and demand within the area. But we wanted, through the financial analysis, to kind of illustrate kind of the full potential of the area. So we kind of identified each lot within that proposed site plan and estimated incremental value for that residential and commercial development within the majority of the area within the district that's presently vacant. So all in all, we've projected, if full build-out is achieved as illustrated here, within the next 10 years by 2032, could generate as much as $182 million of incremental value. If that incremental value is realized, this district has a maximum life of 20 years. So over a 20-year period, approximately $59 million of incremental value would be collected if 59 million of tax revenue would be collected if that 182 million of incremental value is achieved with full build-out of the area. So in terms of the performance of the district, we've just kind of illustrated, again, kind of how full build-out, could look in terms of any costs that might be financed by the city or potential municipal revenue obligations, which is the technical terminology that refers to the development incentives that could be offered to a developer and reimbursed if increment is sufficient to cover the costs. The city, has had a good practice with its past tax incremental districts of matching the pace of investment with the pace of development and trying to minimize, when possible, the amount of upfront infrastructure that's financed by the city. So this kind of illustrates both of those approaches. Again, as it's stated in the project plan, the project costs that are identified, just identify what legally is a TID eligible expense. By approving this project plan, the city is not formally committing to undertake any of these costs. That requires the other typical approvals that the city would follow for its other capital investments, whether it's public infrastructure projects that are approved by common council action or the development incentives that would require a development agreement. So this is very much an illustration in terms of how the district could perform, but in terms of the actual pace and timing of those investments, that will be subject to potential build out within the district and future approvals by the city. So just to kind of summarize again, kind of the purpose of this district, it's a mixed-use district, 20-year maximum life, looking to facilitate construction of primarily commercial and residential development within the district. The project costs that are identified in the project plan are primarily related to the public infrastructure that's been identified for this area to be developed. Also includes some allowances for development incentives. The city will determine which financing method is appropriate as development proposals come forth, and all of those project costs will require separate approval from the Common Council. So that's an overview of the district. I'll pause here, see if any city staff has anything they'd like to add further on the district or anyone else.
Sure, I would just chime in that one of our strategies here with the district is we work with our regional partner, MADREP, the economic development entity, and then also the state, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. One of the things that we need to have in our toolbox is shovel-ready sites. And as we've been responding to some of the recent RFPs from both of those groups, we haven't been able to check those boxes there. And we've got some science technology companies recently. One was a biopharmaceutical company, one was a drug company, another one was a data center that we responded to, but they were asking were they shovel ready and were they in a tax increment district, and we weren't able to check those boxes. So part of this is a proactive strategy to better position ourselves as Fitchburg, but also the region for some of those requests for proposals that are out there for science, tech, lab, and employment companies.
Apparently, I've got to turn on the mic first. I've got a couple of other small points to add to that, so just kind of for the folks that may be listening at home, all of the content that you see up here, just as a sidebar, of course, is out on the city website, so if some of this stuff you weren't really able to put eyes on effectively, go there. Going back into one example, we talk about infrastructure, so I'll just define infrastructure could be roads, it could be stormwater, it could be those things that we need to invest into that space so that it is usable by the organizations or the individuals that plan to build there. I'm going to pick on TIF as just a quick example of where we've used that in the past. So we had anybody that remembers the old Bowen Farm down at Fish Hatchery, that particular parcel had some asbestos remediation, as I recall, that needed to get fixed. We had two other issues. And so that particular parcel, we knew anyone that built on that parcel was going to need to make some pretty substantial investments before it could even be considered for the next build out. And so that's the kind of scenario where we would look at it and say, first of all, if we make those investments and we share it, and we assist them, will we recover in a reasonable period of time? But we also know in that particular case, it's not as though that particular organization gained some special privilege. That work needed to be done before any entity could consider building into that space. So those are the kinds of things that we look at. The work that Greg is doing here is overseen by both Misty as well as Mike. We also have independent bodies, this committee and others that kind of keep an eye on that to make sure that we're staying the course in these projects and doing what we need to do. So those are my additional comments. Greg, I think it's back to you.
I have nothing further, but I'm happy to answer any questions from any of the members if they have any at this time.
I would just mention one thing. I don't know if we mentioned it, that it's in the Oregon School District.
Yes, it is in the
Site.
Oregon
Yes.
School District.
For the public.
Yeah, and I think that we had a slide up there that says anybody that's familiar with where the Hartung Farms property is, that's the parcel that we're talking about, I believe, and I think that was on one of our slides. Any questions or discussion? Mike, do we need any formal motions to recommend that this go off to Plan Commission or?
No, this is just kind of informational, so the public hearing and action by the Plan Commission will be taken up this evening.
And again, for those that are following, we've got a couple of dates. The Plan Commission has discussed going to Common Council on July 26th, and then we come back to this body again, I want to say August 10th.
Yes, Wednesday,
That's-
August 10th.
And that's where we will have gathered not only the approval, but potentially additional due diligence in the process. I believe that was really our primary purpose for being here today. Any other discussion on any other matters before I ask for a motion to close the meeting? Do I have a motion to close today's meeting?
I'll motion to close.
I appreciate that. Second,
Second.
today's meeting closed at 4:10 of the Joint Review Board. We'll see you back here again on August 10th. Thank you, everyone.